Senator from Wayne.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would you please ask the clerk to report Senate Committee Substitute 1?
Mr. Clerk, please report Senate Committee Substitute number 1.
Senate Committee Substitute 1 to Senate Bill 98.
Senator from Wayne.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 98 is a piece of legislation that has been discussed in this legislature for several years. This is a bill that would establish an adult abuse registry, or as I prefer to call it, an adult protection registry, because that's really what this piece of legislation is aimed at. It's about protecting those elderly and disabled, vulnerable adults who are not in a position to be able to protect themselves from caregivers who would or have previously committed abuse on another adult. This bill has had a lot of input from various stakeholders and others who have worked on the issue over the years, and I want to give particular credit to the senator from Jefferson 35, I believe it is, for her work on this issue for some time now. Under the current system that we have in this state of investigating cases of adult neglect, abuse, and exploitation, there is no way for an employer, a future employer, to know whether a person has been found to have committed one of these terrible offenses, and there is no way for employers to protect themselves from the liability of hiring someone who has previously committed a terrible act against an adult, unless there's been a criminal conviction, which sadly does not happen as often as it should. Also, under the current system, there are no due process protections in place to protect the rights of those who have been accused of having committed adult abuse or neglect. This bill does 4 key things. It will create an adult protection registry based on substantiated cases of abuse, neglect, or exploitation that have been substantiated by the Cabinet for Health and Family Services. This bill focuses on caregivers who are working in the field for compensation, because those individuals are the most likely to go on and seek employment with another care provider. And those are the folks who we are really trying to prevent from working with other vulnerable individuals. This bill also creates due process protections for those who have been accused of violations. Alleged perpetrators can only be placed on this registry after they've had a full administrative process to determine that they have in fact committed abuse, neglect, or exploitation, and they must also have the opportunity to file an appeal in circuit court. Finally, the bill also requires vulnerable adult services providers, as outlined in the legislation, to run a check whether potential employees are listed on this registry, so that employers will know if they are hiring someone who has previously been found to have committed adult abuse. The bill will also permit individuals who are seeking employment to access the information about themselves, and they may provide that information, or rather request that the Cabinet provide that information to a prospective employer who is looking to privately hire a caregiver. Mr. President, I want to just briefly share a story that members of the Senate Judiciary Committee heard firsthand about why this piece of legislation is so needed and is so important. We heard testimony in that committee from a lady named Sherry Sanders, who lives in Somerset, Kentucky. Sherry is a member of the Commonwealth Council on Developmental Disabilities, so she is a person who advocates for changes in the law that are important to people with disabilities. She used to live in an institution in this state for people with disabilities and was beaten there every day by a woman who worked at that facility. She said she sometimes would fight back, but then the lady would just beat her even more, and she saw other people hurt by this individual as well. Finally, that lady was fired from the facility, but she did not go to jail and instead went to work for another agency in the same community that provides services to people who are similarly vulnerable. So for people in the same situation as Ms. Sanders, it is extremely important that this legislation move forward so that we can begin to protect those, our seniors and our disabled citizens who are most vulnerable, from those who would seek to do them harm. Mr. President, I do move adoption at this time of Senate Committee Substitute 1.
As a matter of the body, adoption of Senate Committee Substitute number 1. Are there any members seeking recognition? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Senate Committee Substitute number 1 is adopted. Senator from Wayne.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would also ask the clerk to please report Senate Floor Amendment 2.
Mr. Clerk, please report Senate Floor Amendment number 2.
Senate Floor Amendment number 2, the Senate Committee Substitute 1 to Senate Bill 98.
Senator from Wayne.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Floor Amendment number 2 makes just a small change to the language of the bill. It is a friendly amendment, and I would ask for adoption of Senate Floor Amendment number 2 if there are no questions.
Madam for the body is adoption of Senate Floor Amendment number 2 to the Senate Committee Substitute. Are there any members seeking recognition? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Senate Floor Amendment 2 is adopted. Senator from Wayne.
Thank you, Mr. President. With agreement by the Senator from Pike, I would ask that Senate Floor Amendment 1 be withdrawn.
Without objection, so ordered.
And thank you, Mr. President. There are no further questions. I would move passage of Senate Bill 98 as amended by Senate Committee Substitute 1 and Senate Floor Amendment 2.
The matter for the body is the passage of Senate Bill 98 as amended by the Senate Committee Substitute and Senate Floor Amendment number 2. Are there any members seeking recognition for the purpose of questions or discussions? Senator from Pike.
Thank you, Mr. President.